Good morning, everyone. I wanted to keep going with the series that I started last time, looking at the different emerging arguments that people are using. And what I wanted to focus on today is a shift from epistemological arguments, where people are arguing, is the church true, and then looking at things like Book of Mormon historicity, etc., to ethical arguments, asking, is the church good? Is the church doing things that are worthwhile? Is it helping the world or hurting the world? And what I've seen is that this shift is really confounding to a lot of people on both sides of these arguments, but it's a shift that's happening increasingly with the new generation, where they're not really so worried about all the little pieces of history. They're saying, what's happening today, and is this good or bad? I wrote an article. It was like 24 reasons it doesn't matter if the church is true. And the idea was to kind of address this, and I don't think I had framed this shift yet in my mind. It was just all these things that were great about the church, ways that the church helped families, that it increases personal happiness, that increases self-reliance, that it's doing all that's good in the world in terms of humanitarian work. And so I put this out there, and the responses from the usual crowd were all, oh, well, how do you respond to this arcane bit of anti-Mormonism about this thing that couldn't possibly be true historically, etc. So they didn't really grasp the shift, and yet the response from young members of the church to this article was very positive, because this is exactly the kind of information that they were striving for. But I see it the other way too, where you're seeing people who are young looking at the church and saying, oh, the big things about what's good today is how are we treating, for example, LGBT plus issues, and the church is bad on that. And the response that I see a lot from this has been, oh, well, let me explain to you why our stance is correct, rather than, well, let us show you how our stance is helping people. And that is something that I think sort of the traditional sort of apologetic organizations have struggled with, is the shift. A lot of people, they don't care if the church is right about these issues. They care about if what they're doing is good on these issues. And so that's certainly been a big transition, and one that I think that we need to be more aware of if we're going to win over minds and hearts. So in the spirit of the series, I wanted to go to something that happened in 1 Nephi chapter 16. So this is when Lehi and his family are traveling through the wilderness. And so Lehi had this prophecy, and now all these bad things are happening. And so Laman and Lemuel, and even Lehi at this point, they were mad because this has been hard on them. But this has been a bad thing for them, because it's led to these bad consequences. And what Nephi does in this instance is he actually stops the argument. He doesn't keep trying to prove to them that Lehi was inspired like he did in earlier chapters. What he does at this point is he makes a bow and he fixes the problem. And so I think that that's probably the model that Latter-day Saints want to follow as well. Rather than working so hard to try to fight these issues, trying to prove that the church is doing good, I think the best thing that we can do is just do good things, be helpful, solve problems. And when we do good things, it shows that the church is good and the effects of the church are good. And we don't need to necessarily argue that point with words if we're able to argue it with actions like Nephi did. So that's my thoughts on these emerging arguments, and how the same things were addressed in the scriptures. I'll see you guys on Friday.